So now we have a multi-generational ministry moment. The two of us will be reading you a story together. The story is Just Like Flowers, which was written by Jenny Jung. She wrote it as a senior in high school. So, Julia was painting herself in art class. "It's now time to paint my purple hair," she said. She went to grab the purple paint bottle, but she did not have that color. When she looked around the class, she saw that there was no one using purple paint. They were using red, blue, black paint, but no purple paint.
"What's wrong with Julia?" Miss Ross asked when she noticed that Julia had stopped painting.
"Why am I the only one with purple hair?" She was upset that no one else needed purple paint.
Miss Ross smiled at her and told her, "You may look different, but that's not what makes you special. Think about all our differences, as different as the flowers in the garden." Miss Ross went to the nearest planting box and she picked out 2 flowers. One flower was a golden tulip. This is going to have to do it for that. And the other was a white calla lily. Oop. Look at these flowers, Julia. Which color do you think is prettier?
Julia loved the yellow petals, but she also enjoyed the white petals. These flowers are so pretty.
Exactly. Both colors are wonderful. Now, look at you and Layla. Her skin is the color of pearl. Your skin is the color of honey. Your skin colors are different, but still look beautiful on both of you.
Julia noticed how even though the flowers were different colors, both flowers were still lovely, just like her and Layla.
Miss Ross picked up 2 new flowers and asked, "What's the difference between these?"
Julia noticed that one flower had a round shape, and the other flower was more narrow. "Well, Ms. Ross, one flower is shaped like a circle, and the other is shaped like a rectangle."
"Perfect," Miss Ross said. "Look how both these flowers are pleasing even though they're shaped differently. This is like you and Gabriel. You have 2 different body types, but that's what makes both of you uniquely beautiful."
Julia was starting to understand. The differences in flowers were like the differences between her and her classmates. Julia picked 2 flowers on her own. One flower was the length of her arm, and the other was the length of her hand.
Whoop.
"Ms. Ross, I have a tall and a short flower, and they're both amazing."
Miss Ross nodded. "You and Amelia are different heights, just like these flowers."
"I always wanted to be a bit taller, but being short is cool too. I'm like the shorter flower," said Julia.
Miss Ross gathered all the flowers around her and gave them to Julia. "Look at the bouquet."
"What does the word bouquet mean?" Julia asked.
A bouquet means a group of flowers. What would the bouquet look like with only one type of flower?
Julia imagined a bouquet of only roses. The bouquet was a little boring because each flower looked the same. The vibrant bouquet caught more of her attention from all the unique flowers. Each flower is really different, which makes this bouquet exciting.
"This is like our own beauty," Miss Ross explained. "Every person looks different, just like these flowers. We should love these traits that make us. So don't be sad that you're the only one with purple hair, Julia. That's what makes you your own special flower in our bouquet."
Julia looked around. Everyone had a different skin color, body shape, and height. "And just like every flower, each one of my friends is beautiful," Julia cheered.
"Exactly," Miss Ross agreed, and asked Julia if she wanted a hug.
"Yes, I'm so happy for learning this. But wait," Julia shouted, "what about my painting? I still don't have any purple paint." I forgot the little
"It's okay." Layla, Gabriel, and Amelia all turned around. "I have red paint," said Layla.
I have black paint, Gabriel shouted.
And I have blue paint, exclaimed Amalia. What if we mix all our paint? Julia loved Amalia's idea, so she quickly went to work. She grabbed all the paint bottles and started mixing red and blue and black paint, and slowly the paint formed a dark purple. The new paint was a perfect match for Julia's hair. The purple is perfect. She grabbed her paintbrush and she finished painting. Her artwork now looked as good as herself, but the painting was missing one last thing.
Julia dipped her paintbrush into red, blue, and black paint. When she was finished, everyone leaned in to look. Her painting had added red, blue, and black flowers, and each flower had a different color, shape, and height.
Miss Ross smiled. What a beautiful bouquet of flowers.
The end.
Now it's your turn.
So now I'm going to share a reflection on flowers. While most flowers are not edible, they are all nourishing for our soul. Flowers express sentiments of care and love and are sometimes used to offer an apology. Flowers are typically seen at major events such as weddings and funerals. A single rose can convey the same message as dozens of roses. As a kid, I was struck by an entry in my child's encyclopedia. It said a rose is a flower, but in a field of corn, it would be considered a weed. I still know it would look and smell pretty. The scent of most flowers is pleasant, the corpse flower being the most famous exception. Japanese researchers have shown that exposure to the plum blossom fragrance significantly activated the sympathetic nervous system and the cerebral areas related to movement, speech, and memory. Data from that study showed that fragrance evoked cheerful, exciting, and active images and changed mood states by enhancing vigor while suppressing feelings of depression. These findings indicate that contact with floral scents, such as plum blossom fragrance, can improve mood states and may foster brain functions of memory, speech, and movement, potentially leading to improvements in emotional health, depression, and memory disorders. This may be one reason why we send flowers to people when they're hospitalized. Flower gardens are places of beauty where we go to relax, contemplate, and renew. Gardening is therapeutic and a hobby for many, but maybe a curse for those of us without green thumbs. When I was 20, my boyfriend at the time was going out of town for a few weeks and asked me to take care of his plant that was a vine that was strewn over our French doors, our windows, and cascaded down into our dining room. I diligently watered that plant every morning when I woke. But by the time he came back, the leaves had fallen, others had yellowed, and he asked me, why didn't I take care of the plant? But I did. I watered it every day. That's when I learned flowers require care and attention, but not too much and not too little, which is why I admire those of you with green thumbs. Flowers can be a means of communication. The Teleflora website shares a dictionary of flowers and meanings, as well as a link to buy their floral arrangements. If we can have the first slide, is that possible? It states, the pale blue hues calm worries and preoccupation. Blue represents peace, openness, and serenity. Fresh floral arrangements filled with blue flowers offer a cooling antidote to anxiousness. Pink flowers represent grace, gentility, and happiness. Regardless of the shape of the flower, from the tight small buds of a pink garden rose to the delicate open petals of a pink peony in full blossom, pink blossoms convey youth, innocence, and joy. With its origins tied to royalty and ceremony, purple flowers represent dignity, pride, success. Whether grouped alone in a bold range of rich hues or mixed in with other colors to provide depth and contrast, an arrangement filled with purple blossoms represents accomplishment and achievement and admiration. There's an indisputable energy to the color red, an energy that has the power to transform from otherwise unassuming flowers. Red flowers represent desire, strength, and passionate love. With beauty, courage, and heat as its symbolism, it's no surprise that a bouquet filled with rich red blooms knows no restraint. Learning the special symbolism of flowers became a popular pastime in the 1800s. Nearly all Victorian homes, alongside their Bible, had guidebooks for deciphering the language, although some definitions shifted depending on the source. Following the protocol of Victorian-era etiquette, flowers were primarily used to deliver messages that could not be spoken aloud. In a sort of silent dialogue, flowers could be used to answer yes or no. A yes answer came in the form of flowers handed in the right hand. And if the left hand was used, the answer was no. Within societies where openly queer behavior was criminalized, members of the LGBTQ+ communities have used flowers for a safe and subtle way to recognize each other. Oscar Wilde asked his supporters to wear a green carnation to the opening of his 1892 play, Later Windermere's Fan. The carnation went on to be a covert symbol, allowing people to connect and bond, and it may be considered a political act. When we were planning this service, we considered using flower seeds as an art project for all of us to do during the service. But if you think I've got a green thumb, or not have a green thumb, the glue would have been sticking all over me. So the idea came from my love of looking at the seed art creations each year at the State Fair. Art, beauty, and political commentary commingle there. Here are a couple creations that are political acts. Next slide, please. This one is an amazing seed art from, I'm going to come over here and, I won't be able to see it. Oh, well. I can't see it from up here either, but it's basically talking about our opposition to immigrants. But it's from an advocacy group for immigrant families. So while the poem is very disturbing in its language, it's a political act, recognizing the need for us to embrace immigrants. Next slide. As the Snoopy exhibit finishes up in St. Paul, here's one with Lucy saying, "See the horizon over there? See how big this world is? See how much room there is for everybody?" Next one. Gentrification zone. Poor people, please leave quietly. Another one. Good old Ruth. Descent. And I think there's one more. They tried to bury us. They didn't know we were seeds, as we are.
So the story and the history that we're going to share today is that of the Flower Communion. It's good to be reminded of our history. It's from a story that is posted on the Unitarian Universalist website. So if you're curious about it, feel free to study that. It's particularly written by Reginald Zolotti, and it's a story about faith and beauty and a dangerous time in history. The Flower Communion was created by Norbert Kapak, who founded the Unitarian Church in Czechoslovakia. He introduced this special service to his church in 1923. Norbert was raised a Roman Catholic in Czechoslovakia, and he was an alkaloid in his youth. He became disillusioned with the inconsistencies in what he heard said versus what he saw done by the priest in his church. And he resigned the Roman Catholic Church when he was 19. Then he was baptized as a Baptist. This is often common in history of folks connected to Unitarian Universalists. They switch faiths along the way. His religious impulse was strong, and he founded almost a dozen churches from the Ukraine to Budapest.
After years of participation in the International Association for Religious Freedom, which was founded in the 1900s by Unitarians, he left the Baptist ministry. In his diary, he wrote, "I cannot be a Baptist anymore, even in compromise. The fire of new desires, new words is burning inside me. 2 years later, in 1921, he and his wife Maya joined a Unitarian church in Orange, New Jersey, where his grown children had attended. Only a few years later, he and Maya returned to Czechoslovakia and started the School of Religious Science, which trained students for church leadership. He was a leader in the religious movement of Prague, a city which had a Unitarian church of 3,200 members, the largest in the world at the time.
Capek also served a small church on the outskirts of Prague. The building was simple and plain, as were their Sunday services. The inspiration for the flower communion came to him on a beautiful spring day when flowers were blooming and the world was beautiful. On that Sunday, the people came with flowers of all different shapes and sizes and kinds. Flowers filled the vases, and the church wasn't so plain anymore. Maybe the community center is not so plain anymore. He reminded his parishioners that the flowers were like themselves, different colors, different shapes, and different sizes, each needing different kinds of care, but each beautiful and important and special in its own way.
History says that it was during her tour of the United States that Maya introduced the flower communion in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Maya was unable to return to Prague due to the outbreak of World War II. Capek remained in Prague. He was an advocate for religious freedom and progressive education. His work was seen as a threat to the Nazis who occupied his homeland. He was picked up by the Gestapo and sent to Dachau, where he was killed. It was not until the war was over that Norbert Capek's death in the Nazi concentration camp was revealed.
That simple service, practiced in most UU congregations today, is inspired by the sight of flowers surrounding that little church full of people who recognize the gift of religious freedom. Like you, they found a religious home with theological diversity that was grounded in a call to a genuine life of faith, hope, worship, love, and conscientiousness. The simple act of communion, which comes from the Latin word communium, meaning fellowship, mutual participation or sharing, was a radical act, and it still is in a dark time in history. We too must stay open, looking for ways to commune across differences and divides and ways to celebrate that which is beloved and beautiful and sacred.
So now, we will take part in the ritual of the flower communion, a ritual that reminds us that even though we are all different, we gather as one in love. Let us remember that we are all needed to make this beautiful world. We are changing things up a bit this year. Instead of just silently selecting a flower, we're going to ask you to come up, select your flower. You can come up individually or with somebody else. We use the flowers to help us symbolize the love that is hidden deep within us. Flowers are beautiful, and so are the feelings of love among us. As you take a moment with your flower,